Welcome to The Problem Was Me. I'm your host, Tom Gagliano. I'm a best-selling author, family dynamics expert, and social worker. And we'll be discussing childhood messages and their impact on addiction, the intimacy we have or don't have, our parenting skills, the careers we choose, even the roles we're set up to play in life. Do you put other people's needs ahead of your own? Do you have a hard time sharing your feelings? Do you feel invisible? Do you have a hard time saying no to others? Do you have an inner voice screaming for help, but yet you're so afraid of allowing others to hear this voice? Well, you've come to the right show. I'll be touching upon these issues and much more from my personal and professional experiences to help you end the negative self-talk and take your life to a new level. The Problem Was Me starts now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Problem Was Me with me, your host, Tom Gagliano. So in this podcast, we're going to focus on addiction. What makes an addict put their addiction ahead of themselves, those they love, even God, if they do believe in God? Why does addiction become so powerful it becomes a form of oxygen where the addict can't live without it? I'm a recovering addict. I know this. So in this podcast, we're going to understand not only what creates the addictive thinking, but what the solution is. Not only how to stop, but stay stopped. And we're going to talk about why addicts turn away love and help when it's offered to them. I'm going to talk about the effect the addict has on all the relationships around them and how to heal those relationships. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces scattered all over the place. And we can't really see how it fits. Or the why of why addicts do what they do. We're going to figure that out. We're going to put those pieces together in this podcast. So in this podcast, we're going to break it into three pieces. The problem, number one, the solution, number two, and how to work the solution, number three. What's the problem? Well, let me tell you, it's not the addiction. That's the symptom. The problem is a brokenness inside, and I'll get more into that as we get into the podcast. The feeling of defectiveness, the feeling like I don't matter. That's the key, because if you stop one addiction and you don't heal that brokenness inside, you'll switch seats on a Titanic and you'll find other addictions the way I did. So that's the problem, is the brokenness inside. So that's the first piece we're going to put in this jigsaw puzzle. Solution. A we process, not a me process, a we process. We need to build witnesses. Witnesses that know our truth. They could be 12 steps, therapist, sponsor, support group. They could be a rabbi, a priest, a bishop, anybody that knows your truth, that there's no secrets, that know your truth. So in the solution, number two, we want to grow the willingness to get help, Let's go to three, how to work the solution. This is tough for all addicts. A big piece to the jigsaw puzzle. The willingness to take direction, to do what you're told, whether you want to or not, when you feel like it or not. It's important to understand, as I know for me, thinking of the addict. See, we don't trust any process we can't control. We're afraid. We've been let down. We've been betrayed. And any process that we can't control, like recovery, we don't want to give up that decision-making process, a very big piece to the puzzle. What do we know about addiction? Well, we do know that the cemetery is filled with addicts that thought they could control their addiction. We do know that. So that's a big piece. So the first piece in understanding, what we need to understand is that addiction becomes an emotional substitute. Instead of going to people for our nurturing needs, we need to find something else. I believe, and you don't have to agree with me, I believe that early on our brain told us, don't feel, you'll be hurt. So your brain was trying to protect you and said, hey, listen, let's find something to distract, something that we can move away from feelings. We found addiction. Now, in childhood, that was a self-survival mechanism. In adulthood, it's going to sabotage all your relationships. This is what I believe. So where does willingness come from? Well, usually it comes from losing something that we have or not getting something we want. Usually it comes from our family, they're throwing us out, or legally, we're in trouble with the courts, drunken driving, drugs, we got caught with pornography, or whatever the hell it is. Or three, employment. We can't hold a job. We don't show up at time. Those are the areas where what creates willingness. Because at the end of the day, I don't care how much you need to get help. You're only going to get help if you want to. That's why we push away love and help when it's offered to us. It's got to come from the wanting to get help, not the needing to get help. And remember what I said earlier. We don't trust any process we can't control. That's a big obstacle in healing our pain inside. So let's talk about the problem and the willingness to get help. We have to fix that brokenness. I'm going to give you a little bit of my story. I came from a bad childhood. Dad was an alcoholic who, when he came home drunk, he meant he was going to hurt people. Now, I was that defiant kid. I used to take all his bottles of booze, spill it out in the sink, and leave the bottles there for him to see. I didn't throw those bottles away. When he came home, I wanted him to see. And he would look at and say, what happened to all my booze here? I don't know. And the beatings would start. Had a mom who used to take me to hotel rooms, put me in front of the door, knock on the door. My father was with some other lady and run away. And the insanity would start. I had a priest. I went to elementary Catholic school, and a priest that touched me inappropriately a few times. What is the overall message? That's why I'm telling you this. The overall message is, I didn't matter. Who cared about me? No one. Here's the main nucleus of the jigsaw puzzle. And I said this in every podcast, and I'll keep saying it. A child that feels like they don't matter to their parents will not stop loving their parents. They will stop loving themselves. That's a tremendous piece to this jigsaw puzzle. So to further my life, I was always searching for something that made me feel like I mattered to my parents, to others. My father would go to the track, and if he won money, he'd give me $1. It wasn't $1. It made me feel like I was a part of him, like I mattered to him. When I got older, unfortunately, I had cancer in my early 20s. And my father would take me for treatments. And he was empathetic to me. He was kind to me. I mattered. You know, when I have clients and I go deeper, go deeper, go deeper, I would say a good percentage of them will tell me I felt like I never mattered in my childhood, even in my adult life, because I'm time traveling. I'm going back to those feelings when I'm feeling hurting, when I'm afraid, when I'm feeling, I time travel back to that little kid that feels like they don't matter. No matter what other people in my adult life show me, I feel like I don't matter when those feelings awaken in me. So as I grew older, money became my God. Even at 11, I was buying soda cans for 10 cents a can about 45 years ago, selling them for a quarter, making money. Money became my higher power. That became my first distraction before my addictions came in. And I've always been good money in business, always was a good businessman, but unfortunately I was spending 2 times that much in addictions because I was broken, I was hurting, I was defective, and I dare not let anybody know that. So here's the 2 things that changed my life. One was my father, believe it or not. My father was in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, for 15 years. And I'm not telling anybody they should go to AA, sponsor, but you need somebody other than yourself. It's a we process. Therapist, support group, bishop, rabbi, priest. You need somebody other than yourself to heal the brokenness inside. So one night, my mother called me up and told me my father was very ill. I had said this in another podcast, but I want to say it again because it's a very important point I want to make here. I went to the hospital to see him, and I sat right near him, and we were talking about life and this and that. And at that time, his cancer had spread and he was terminal. He was very, very ill at that time. He didn't have long to live. And my mother said, you better see him because he's going to die soon. And when I got up from the hospital, my father grabbed my hand and he said, I was sitting there 20 years ago. He said to me that he was there when his father was dying from cancer. He said, I never could tell my father I loved him. I never could share my feelings with my father. See, my father became a great-grandfather, a different person through Alcoholics Anonymous. But to me, he was still a 10-foot giant. I left that hospital room in all kinds of pain. Another big piece to the puzzle. Me and addicts do not know how to regulate our discomfort. We don't know how to do these things. And I didn't either. I swore and prayed to God, please, God, help me. Help me. And I never prayed before. I'm ready to go back to all my addictions. And out of the elevator came one of the people that were in my 12-step programs. I started to go to 12-step work, but I really wasn't in it. I'd leave early. I'd get there early, leave late. I had only 1 foot in. And this guy came out of the elevator in St. Peter's Hospital. I believe my higher power sent him to me and I hugged him. Man, I needed him. Here's the end of the story. I didn't know how to regulate my feelings. The next few days, my father passed away and the wake happened. And here's another piece to I mattered. When the wake started and I saw all these people from the 12-step fellowships come in, I felt like I mattered. Just the way I did when I was suffering with cancer and my father took me to get treatments, I mattered. Even in the sick way, when he gave me $1 at the racetrack, I mattered. I mattered. Such an important piece to this puzzle. And after that, I went from just going to 12-step meetings to having sessions at my house, 12-step meetings on Wednesdays, Saturdays, doing all 12-step work with my sponsees. I dove in with 3 feet, not just 1. And then I had another situation with my son that really changed things. We were watching a baseball game at 8 years old. He said, Dad, how come those fans root so hard for their favorite baseball player? I said, those baseball players are the heroes. At 8 years old, he's thinking about what I said. He came back and said, Dad, they may be my heroes someday, but you're always going to be my first hero. And I realized the power of childhood messages. And then I turned my groups into childhood messages. They told me to write a book on what I was doing. I wrote a best-selling book with Dr. Abraham Tversky called The Problem Is Me. And Tversky was a great, great person. And then they told me to go back to school, and I hated school. I hated it. But I did what my witnesses told me. The very first day I walked out of my stoop with my little loose leaf book, my little bottle of water, my little pen, I'm going back 30 years. I hated it. I went to the wrong class, the wrong building at Rutgers, but I had 2 sponsees that helped me that were also going for this social work. And I walked into the wrong room, and in that room was the professor who turned to me and said, Tom, he was somebody that came to my group. He walked over to me. He said something profound, another piece to the puzzle. He says, I don't know why you're here, but I could tell you saved my marriage. And I could tell you, get your feet where they should be, and your head will follow. You know, sometimes God shows up, even when you don't even know. So we're going to take a short break now. We're going to come back and we're going to work the problem, the solution, and how to work the solution. Stay tuned. Hi, Tom Gagliano back, and let's run right to the problem. The first piece, problem, solution, and how to work the solution. Here's the problem. All children are egocentric. I learned this from Erickson in college when I went for my master's degree. The world revolves around them. When my son was 5 years old and I was walking down the steps with him, one day I had him in my arms and I slipped and we tumbled down the stairs and I got a nail in my shoulder, broke my glasses, but I curdled and helped him. You know what he told me? Dad, it's not nice to throw little boys down the stairs. And he was fine. Egocentricity. Again, I go to the most important piece. Child that doesn't matter to their parents won't stop loving their parents. They'll stop loving themselves. So what happens when a child doesn't feel like they matter, they fragment two pieces. They show the world one piece. Addicts come in all different shapes, sizes, religions, colors, the whole deal. In the inside, we all relate. There's a brokenness and a pain inside. So what is the solution to fragmentation? Congruency. Say what I mean what I say, and to become congruent, to feel like I do matter. My feelings matter. My thoughts matter. That's where I want to take my clients. That's what I help them with. And in my book, The Problem Was Me, I talk about that warden, that fictitious character, sitting on your shoulder, beating you down, telling you you're not good enough, telling you don't matter. Well, we got to silence that warden and move on to the next piece. So solution. We want to go from fragmentation to congruency. And that takes the willingness to take direction. My best thinking never worked. Never did. So I have to give up the decision-making process and let other people guide me. I had an inner voice, like all addicts, screaming for love and help, but I dare not let anybody see that voice. So working the solution with couples and with addicts. And what about the significant other or the family? Well, I want to make this clear. They adapt an adaptive role with the addict that's not healthy. That's got to change. They confuse selfishness with self-care. They confuse empathy with codependency. They confuse enabling with helping. They think if I lecture the addict, I'll get him to see reality. Or if I give them the silent treatment, they're going to get it. Or if I protect them and tell the boss or families they're not feeling good, that's why they couldn't attend, I'm helping them. No, that's enabling them. What really works is detaching with love. And the co-addict needs to get help themselves to change that adaptive role. And that ain't easy because they sit back and go, what did I do? I'm the innocent victim here. It's not easy. I love Al-Anon for the 3 C's. You can't control it, cure it, and you didn't cause it. I love Al-Anon. But it doesn't have to be Al-Anon. It could be a therapist. But you got to work on the role that you were playing with the addict in order to make the relationship better. And remembering, you're not only in a relationship with your partner, but you're in a relationship with their childhood messages as well. And they're in a relationship with your childhood messages as well. That's the only version they have. And remembering that when we get scared in our adult life, if we do fear intimacy, we'll go back to the self-surviving roles we played as children. We'll shut down, run away, get angry. We'll go back to that little boy, that little girl. We got to be aware of that in order to make our adult self take charge. And remembering that uncomfortable conversations, if done like a healthy person with validation, empathy, concern, caring, boundaries, is the road to emotional intimacy, is creating help with your significant other. So I want to go to groups now, the groups I run. I run 3 groups a week with recovering addicts. And what is group? It's a testing ground. So we learn in group what we can take outside. So in my groups, we check in the first few minutes, each member. What was the emotional experiences they felt that week? What was their uncomfortability? Of course, we check in how they're doing with their addiction. And believe me, addiction is when the dynamite explodes. But before the dynamite explodes, there's the fuse that gets lit. What lights the fuse? An uncomfortable feeling, conflict, that I'm not talking to my group members. They're all on group text. No excuse. Put it out there. And if I don't talk about that, the ritual starts. And believe me, that's powerful, that ritual. That happens before I act out with my addiction. So if I am eliminating my witnesses while all this is happening, I'm powerless. I'm done. I'm going to act out. So we all talk about our rituals. We all talk about our childhood trauma. We all pay attention to what we did to survive as children so we don't reenact that as an adult. And we'll all go back to that. And why? We go to our witnesses, those members that know our truth, those members that know all about us, and they're all on group text and they all put it out there. We learn that uncomfortable conversations, if carried on like an adult, with compassion, with empathy, sharing our feelings, validating their feelings and using boundaries, actually is the road to emotional intimacy. But we're so afraid of those conversations. You know what we love? Isolation. Very comfortable, very toxic. That's what we love. So we learned that uncomfortable conversations in my group is the road to emotional intimacy. We role play sometimes where one of the members will talk about this uncomfortable conversation they had with their spouse, and that member will be their wife, and the other 7 members will be the husband. And of course, in time, they all become themselves. But we build on how to have the right conversations, because if the conversations aren't working, change the conversations. This is another piece that we talk about in group. And trusting and having the courage through supportive group to do for us what we can't do for ourselves can have us have those uncomfortable conversations. So what are we doing in group? We're moving from fragmentation, which is the problem. Nobody's going to know about me. And we're moving towards congruency. Say what we mean what we say. And here's the key, the nucleus of the jigsaw puzzle. I matter. I deserve to be happy. A message that we never learned for many of us in our childhood. And that moves us towards congruency, to know that we do deserve to be happy. And here's a biggie, to learn self-forgiveness. I can tell you, for me, self-forgiveness was really tough. To believe that I deserve to be happy, to forgive myself for what I did. Not to forget, to work on what I need to work on to make amends to people, but to remember that I'm a loving child of God and I need to work on that self-forgiveness. And what happens at the end of the group? Each member goes around and talks about what they could take out of group. What did they learn there? What could they take out of group and bring into the interpersonal relationships with their partner, children, parents, whatever it is? What did they learn? And piece by piece, that jigsaw puzzle starts to fit together. And all of a sudden, I see it. I see the puzzle fitting together. I'm not scattered all over the place, thinking I am the worst person that ever lived in my addiction, hating myself for the things I did, hurting those I love for the things I did, pulling away from God for the things I did. So again, it's important for everybody listening to this, a we process, not a me process. I'm not telling you got to go to 12 steps and get a sponsor like I did. I did it all. I'm not telling you that you have to get a therapist, a support group. It could be anything, but you cannot do this alone. And remember, you're not going to want to do certain things. You're not going to try it. You're not going to trust certain processes. You're not going to want to let love and help in because you're not going to trust it, not as much as you trust your addiction. So at the end of the day, you got to do what you don't feel like doing. Do what you don't feel like doing. That will open the door to start the jigsaw puzzle, to start to put the pieces together. Next week, we're going to talk about couples intimacy, 7 ways we could build intimacy with our significant other. I hope you join me every first and third Tuesday of the month on Transformation Talk Radio. And soon we're going to have questions coming in after I do a few of these podcasts, and I would love to hear feedback. Thank you for joining me today. You've been listening to The Problem Was Me with me, the host, Tom Gagliano. Tune in every first and third Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time on the Transformation Talk Radio as I help you break the cycle of negative and addictive thinking affecting the emotional intimacy you have, your parenting skills, the careers you choose, even the roles you were set up to play. As a high-profile leader in addiction and self-help, I've helped develop unique methods and procedures which have helped numerous institutions and individuals. For more information on how I can assist you creating a healthier life, visit theproblemwasme.com.